I think you can play. I think you can get it for a PC, but
It's definitely
an
on Steam.
Xbox.
Yeah, nice.
I've played it on Steam.
And Steam.
How's everyone? All right?
Hi, Michael. Oh, you're growing some facial hair.
Yes.
The opposite of me.
Bit of a shadow. Yeah. Yeah. Send it this way.
That's a beautiful headboard. Yeah.
How's your weekend, Jen? All right. Yeah.
Huh?
What you'll be up to? I went for a walk around a forest with a friend, which was wonderful.
Forests are good.
Yeah. And we found lots of little cute elf doors which had been put on the sides of trees, which is quite
Oh, that's really cute.
It's really cute. And then we had frozen yogurt, mango flavour. So good. With hundreds of raspberry sorbet on top. Sherbet, raspberry sorbet.
Delicious, delicious.
I mean, just count me in for the raspberry sherbet, really. Has it been a hard day, Frankie? You've been out.
Don't you with me. I have had a very hard day, but it's all good now. I got some more of my books.
No. Oh, thousands.
So it's
Do you
sort
want
of
to
like
see?
hard work with a payoff.
Yeah.
I've spent up to about 5 months ago, like attempting to get them all / as many as possible on the shelves. Unhitch you, see if I can.
What organisation category have you got? Hey, you know.
Along my bed. Got some on the other side, and then I got a little pile of recipe books, and then I managed to get most of them.
Whoa.
Oh, colour. That's great.
On there. So yeah, feeling pretty.
Shaking her head. She's not
Feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah.
Who's shaking their head?
Katie.
Oh,
Are
Casey.
you one of these A to Z people?
Yeah.
If
I think I want to read an Agatha Christie, I want to go to the 4 shelves of Agatha Christie that I have and look at all of them and decide which one I want. I don't want to have to find them all over the house separated by colour.
See,
What if you want a mango flavoured book?
I think because I've been organising them by colour for so many years, I remember them by colour. Like I'm much more likely to be like, oh God, what was that book? It had a witch in it, and it like the cover was red. Then be like, oh yes, I want to read this book by this author. I'm like, God, what was it? Like I can't remember anything about it except it was like red and had like gold foil embossing on the cover.
Yeah, I have a lot of books by, like I have a lot of collections by the same author, and I never really know which one I want to read, which is why it's handy having them all in one place.
I think the only author that I have like lots and lots of books by is Georgette Heyer. What are you gonna do?
Shame you.
Shame. Hey, there's no shame in pleasurable reading. I mean,
of course, you could just paint the spines of the books different colours based on author, and then the two systems would merge to be the same.
Don't make me mute you, Michael, because I will. You know I have the power. Megan, what did you say?
Oh, I just find that my books' covers are different from the spine, which is very much the same thing that you were saying. Yeah, oftentimes I'll remember the book and then I'll look at the spines by color, and I can't find it because I have to pull it all the way out to take a spy on the front side.
That is very sneaky. I get quite annoyed with that one. I'm like, it was purple. It was definitely purple. I know it was purple. I'm looking at all my purple, and then finally I like pull out a black spine, and it's.
How do you deal with like the Folio Society dust jacket thing, where you have the actual hard case, which is always in a different colour?
I mean, it's fine. Like, that's, you know, as long as it's a recognizable color that I can go in my head, I know what color this book is, and it's blue. That's fine. I don't mind if it's a dust jacket or a... But I've got most of my folios, like, out prestige next to my bed now, so that I can...
prestige books.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Shakespeare and Harry Potter. The only prestige books anyone needs, right?
Wizardiverse.
Wizardiverse, yes. Well, I know I've got Wizardiverse on my yellow shelf. Anyway, enough about that. How's everybody else? Ooh, what you reading, Katie?
I'm reading Colour Scheme, which is set in New Zealand. One of the couples set in New Zealand.
How exciting!
It's great. It's about a guy that drowns in a hot mud pool geyser thing.
Oh,
A geezer that
wonderful.
drowns in a geezer.
something ideal Saturday night, am I right?
Oh yeah.
Have you found out who done it yet?
I can't remember who does it.
Oh my god.
No.
No, the suspense.
It was the sister. It was the sister, or the vicar. No, it was the vicar's sister who did it.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Spoilers. Sorry, I should have warned for spoilers. That's not a spoiler. Right? There's not a vicar or a sister in it.
There is not a vicar nor a sister.
How much of an idiot would I have felt?
Yet.
That was fortunate.
I mean, Frankie, you're forgetting that's how it works in an English town.
That's true. That's true. Hold on. Right. Okay. First. What time is it?
1 minute.
1 minute to story time.
1 minute story time. I'm gonna go ahead and start now.
Oh no, I'm gonna go to the loo.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start when Katie has weed, because we have quite a big, we have Michael. We have quite a long one tonight.
So much tea.
Hey.
Sorry.
Listen, you bastards. So we're gonna do 2 chapters and like a few pages tonight. Are we 11, 12?
What happened last time? Fireproofing spell? Was that the one before? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Fireproofing happened, and then they found out that one of the wizards is kicking about maybe taking some plants that are important, and also in cahoots with the dragon of the other business.
Yes. Thank you, Kitty. Fucking gold star for Kitty.
We literally just watched it. So.
Take your gold star.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Okay. So the point is, it's quite a bit of a long one tonight, and then a bit of a long one tomorrow night, just so we don't end up doing a short one tonight and then like be here for 5 hours tomorrow.
Yay,
so
5 hours.
I'm going to
Yay, 5 hours.
A chocolate mousse tomorrow.
Control is Nikki.
Listen. Right, I'm gonna mute you all. I don't know. It's a guy. Got to do it again. A cup of coffee around here. Okay, so 2 and a bit chapters tonight. Now. Are you sitting comfortably? That's my favourite bit. And I'll begin. Chapter 11, in which Kazul is unwell and Cimarine makes a new acquaintance. Oh shit, new acquaintance. I haven't thought of a new voice. We'll do it. We'll manage when we get there. Alienora decided to return home by way of the path outside instead of through the tunnels because it was such a nice day and she hoped the sun would dry her skirt. Cimarine watched her go, swinging her basket happily and humming a little, her confidence and good humour completely restored by the possession of the fat little packet of dried feverfew in her pocket. I wish I had as little to worry about, Cimarine muttered, thinking of Waraug and the wizards. She held the burned patch at the end of her sleeve up to get a better look at him in the sunlight and shook her head. Even the magic wardrobe would have a hard time fixing that. A puff of wind made her shiver in her wet clothes, and she turned to go back into the cave to change. A dark shadow fell over Cimarine, and she stopped and looked up. "Kazul," she said as the dragon landed on the open path beside her. "Am I glad to see you? Wait until you hear what's been happening." "You do appear to have had a rather strenuous day," Kazul said, eyeing Cimarine's wet, stained skirt and the blackened end of her right sleeve. "Nothing serious, I trust." "I'm not sure," Cimarine said. "Alienora and I went out to pick some feverfew and we ran into that wizard, Antarel." "Where was this?" Cimarine pointed. "Up that way. There's a little round valley off to one side that looks as if dragons never go there, and you found a wizard there." Kazul sounded deeply disturbed. "How did he get in? How did you get in?" "We climbed through a crack in a boulder," Cimarine said. "I don't know how Antarel did it. When he left, he was heading for the far side of the valley." "This is serious," Kazul said, getting to her feet. "I'd better warn the king. He'll have to use the crystal now." "You'd better hear the rest of it first," Cimarine said. "Antarel wasn't too happy to see us, but when he found out that Alienora was Waraug's princess, he relaxed. He seemed to think that Waraug had sent us." "What?" Cimarine involuntarily stepped back a pace at the anger in Kazul's voice. "He thought Waraug had sent us," she repeated, and gave a quick summary of her conversation with Antarel. "Waraug!" Kazul's tail lashed, sweeping a small boulder from one side of the path to the other. "But Waraug's not a fool, and only a fool would let a wizard into that valley, unless he was sure they didn't know. What was Antarel doing?" "Cutting plants," Cimarine said. "Or rather, cutting a plant. It didn't look as if he took more than one." "He wouldn't need more than one if it was the right one," Kazul said tensely. "What did he pick?" "It was a prickly-looking purple thing with saw-edged leaves," Cimarine said, reaching into her pocket. "I didn't recognize it, but I thought you might, so I brought back a piece for you to look." "What?" Kazul roared. Flame spurted from the dragon's mouth, enveloping Cimarine. Steam hissed from her wet skirt, and the thinner material of her sleeves vanished in a crackle of sparks. The handkerchief-wrapped spray of purple leaves, which she had just taken out of her pocket to show Kazul, disintegrated into a dark, greasy-looking cloud of smoke. Cimarine stared at the ashes in her palm, feeling very, very glad that she had decided to test the way fresh feverfew would work in the fireproofing spell. She felt a little warm, and her clothes had been reduced to a few charred rags, but that was nothing compared to what might have happened. "Now I understand why Alienora ran out of feverfew," she muttered. A puff of wind brushed Cimarine's arms, and she heard a choking sound from Kazul. She looked up, expecting to find the dragon laughing at her remark, and her eyes widened. Kazul's head was thrown back and her mouth was wide open, giving Cimarine an excellent view of the dragon's sharp silver teeth and long red tongue. Cimarine skipped backward out of reach. Then she realized that the dragon was gasping for air. "Kazul, what's the matter?" "The smoke," Kazul coughed. Her voice was so hoarse that it was hard for Cimarine to understand what she was saying. "What can I do?" Cimarine said, trying not to feel frightened. "Green jar, shelf in last treasure room," Kazul managed between coughs. "Hurry!" Cimarine was already running through the mouth of the cave as fast as her feet could carry her. She did not even pause as she snatched up her lamp from the floor just inside the door. It seemed to take forever to get through the twisty passages and the first two caves full of treasure. She skidded to a halt in the doorway of the third room and stood panting, scanning the walls for the shelf and the right jar. She found it quickly and ran back at once, the jar clutched tightly in her right hand. The sound of Kazul's coughing grew louder as Cimarine sped back the way she had come. At the mouth of the cave, Cimarine paused and set down the lamp, then unscrewed the top of the green jar. Inside was a thick, emerald-coloured liquid about the consistency of honey. She looked out at Kazul. The dragon's head jerked with each cough, and the scales on her neck were beginning to turn pink around the edges. For a long, careful moment, Cimarine studied Kazul's movements. Then she leaned back and threw the emerald liquid, jar and all, into the dragon's open mouth, just as Kazul took another gasping breath. The jar landed on Kazul's tongue. The dragon's mouth closed, and she swallowed convulsively. Sudden silence descended. "Are you all right now?" Cimarine asked after Kazul had taken several deep breaths without a renewed bout of coughing. "I will be," Kazul said. She sounded exhausted, and her movements as she slid into the cave were slow and uncertain. "What happened?" Cimarine said, backing out of the way so that Kazul would not have to exert herself to go around. "I got a breath of the smoke when the plant in your hand burned," Kazul said as she settled to the floor just inside the entrance. "Lucky it was only a breath. I'll need a few days of rest, but that's better than being dead." Cimarine stared at her, appalled. What was that plant? "Dragon's bane," said Kazul. Her eyes closed, and she slept. Kazul continued to sleep for most of the next 3 days. She woke only long enough for Cimarine to pour a couple of gallons of warm milk mixed with honey down her throat from time to time before she lapsed back into unconsciousness. Cimarine was very worried, but there wasn't much that she could do. Sick dragons are too large and heavy for normal nursing to be of much use. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Kazul woke up completely for the first time since her collapse. "Thank goodness," said Cimarine as Kazul shook her head experimentally and sat up. "I was beginning to think you were going to sleep for a month." "I might have if I'd gotten more than a whiff of that smoke." Kazul stretched her neck in one direction and her tail in the other, trying to work out some of the kinks. "If I'd known it was so dangerous, I'd never have brought any of that purple plant back with me," Cimarine apologized. "You might have done worse than sleep for a month. You might have..." She stopped, unwilling to complete the thought. "I might have died," Kazul said. "Unlikely. If a dragon isn't killed outright by something in the first 5 minutes, recovery is only a matter of time. That applies as much to Dragon's Bane as to a knight's magic sword." "Then why did you want that goo in the green jar?" Cimarine asked. "The antidote? I wanted it because I didn't like the idea of spending a month recuperating when I didn't have to. And since..." A fit of coughing interrupted Kazul in mid-sentence. Cimarine skipped backward out of the way. Frowning worriedly, she tossed a pinch of feverfew into the air and recited the verse from the fireproofing spell in case Kazul should lose control of her flame again. "Maybe you won't need a month to recover, but 3 days obviously isn't enough," she said to the dragon. "You'd better lie back down before you choke." "I can't," Kazul said. "I have to warn the king. If the wizards have had Dragon's Bane for 3 days already..." She started coughing again and had to stop talking. "You stay here," Cimarine said in a firm tone. "I'll warn the king." "Tokaz won't listen to you," Kazul said, but she settled back to the ground. "Roxim will, though. Start with him." "Roxim?" Cimarine said doubtfully. She was afraid the grey-grain dragon would want to go charging out after the wizards as soon as he heard they were up to something. "He'll listen to you, and the king will listen to him," Kazul said. "It's not ideal, but it's the best we can do." "All right, I'll go see Roxim. You stay here and sleep." "When you get back, I'll wake you and tell you what he said," Cimarine promised. "Now, go to sleep." Kazul smiled slightly and closed her eyes. Cimmerine caught up a lamp and almost ran to the exit at the back of the cave. She was afraid that Kazul would think of something else and start talking again, and she didn't think talking would be good for her. In the tunnel outside, Cimmerine paused, trying to remember the directions to Roxanne's cave. She had memorized a map in the library that showed most of the twists and turns of the dragon's tunnels, but she knew from experience that in the miles of grey stone corridors, it was difficult to keep track of where she was. Left, fifth right, past the little chamber, right again, on past the iron gate, 2 lefts to the 3rd cave down, she muttered to herself. I wish Roxanne's cave were closer. Still muttering, she started off. Though she was being very careful, Cimmerine had to backtrack twice during the first part of her trip when a mistake in counting corridors led her to a dead end. When she finally saw the iron gate that led into the caves of fire and night, she sighed in relief. The tricky part was over, and the rest of the trip would be easy. She held her lamp up and quickened her step, hoping to make up some of the time she had lost on her detours. Then, as she reached the bars that blocked the entrance to the caves of fire and night, she stopped short. There was someone sitting on the ground on the other side of the gate. Cimmerine had almost missed seeing him, and no wonder. His clothes, though well cut, were the same dark grey as the stone of the tunnel walls, and he was curled into a lumpy, dejected ball. He looked like a large rock. If he hadn't moved his hand as she passed, Cimmerine would never have realised he was alive. The man on the other side of the bars raised his head, and Cimmerine saw with shock that his hair and skin were the same dark, even grey as his clothes. His eyes, too, were grey, and their expression was apologetic. Forgive me for startling you, the man said, climbing ponderously to his feet. I didn't see you coming. He made a stiff, formal bow. Who are you? Cimmerine demanded. And what are you doing in there? I'm a prince, the man said in a gloomy tone, and I'm reaping the rewards of my folly. What folly? The prince sighed. It's a long story. Somehow they always seem to be long, Cimmerine said. You haven't come to rescue me from the dragons, have you? Because if you have, I'm not going to let you out of there. I haven't got time to spend an hour arguing today. I have no interest whatever in dragons, I assure you, the prince said earnestly. And if you would let me out, I'd be extremely grateful. Who are you, by the way? Cimmerine, Princess of the Dragon Kazul, Cimmerine said. She studied the prince for a moment and decided that he looked trustworthy. All right, I'll let you out. Turn around and put your fingers in your ears. What? The prince said, looking considerably startled. It's part of the spell to open the gate, Cimmerine said. She wasn't about to let him overhear the words Kazul had used to unlock the door, even if he did look trustworthy. The prince shrugged and did as she directed. Quickly, Cimmerine recited, By night and flame and shining rock, open thou thy hidden lock, Aber-Lingalan. For an instant nothing happened, and Cimmerine was afraid she had not remembered the charm correctly. Then the iron gate swung silently open. The prince, whose back was to the gate, did not notice. Cimmerine touched his shoulder to get his attention, and her eyes widened. Oh, she said as he turned, You're stone. I know, the prince said. It's part of that long story I mentioned earlier. I haven't gotten used to it yet. He slipped through the gate and it closed noiselessly behind him. I'm afraid I don't have time to listen to stories just now, Cimmerine said politely. I have a rather urgent errand to run, so if you'll excuse me, can't I come with you? Cimmerine stared at him. Why do you want to do that? The stone prince looked down at his feet with an embarrassed expression. Well, actually, I'm lost, and you seem to know your way around down here. He glanced hopefully at Cimmerine's face, then sighed. I suppose I can just wander around some more. I'll have to find a way out eventually. You'll run into a dragon and get eaten. I don't think it will hurt, Stone, the prince said. He sounded almost cheerful, as if he had only just realised that being made of stone might have some advantages. Maybe not, but you're sure to give the dragon indigestion, Cimmerine said. Bother, I don't have time for this. I could wait here if you're coming back this way, the stone prince suggested. Cimarine brightened, then frowned and shook her head. No, one of the dragons might need to get into the caves of fire and night, or it might be the turn of those dratted wizards. You can't stay here. Then, I know, you can wait in the serving room just off the banquet hall, Cimarine said. It's close, there's plenty of room, and I know no one's using it today because I checked the schedule for Alienora yesterday. I can take a shortcut out the back to get to Roxham's without losing any more time. Come on. I really appreciate this, the Stone Prince said as they started off. You don't know what it's like being lost in the dark in those caves. How did it happen? Cimarine asked. The Stone Prince's expression became gloomy once more. It's all that soothsayer's fault, he said. Soothsayer? My father didn't think it was appropriate to invite fairies to a prince's christening, so he invited a soothsayer instead, the prince replied. The soothsayer took one look at me and said that I would grow up to do a great service for a king. I've been stuck with his blasted prophecy ever since. Doesn't sound so terrible to me, Cimarine said. Wasn't at first, the Stone Prince admitted. I had special tutors in all sorts of interesting things to prepare me for being of great service to a king. My father even sent me to a special school for people who were supposed to do special things. Did you do well? I was the top of my class, the Stone Prince said with a flash of pride. His face fell again. That's part of the problem. I don't understand, Cimarine said. This way. And can you walk a little faster, please? I'm in a hurry. It's been 3 years since I graduated, and everyone's still waiting for me to do something spectacular, the Stone Prince said, lengthening his stride. The rest of my classmates are already making names for themselves. George started killing dragons right away, and Art went straight home and pulled some sort of magic sword out of a rock. Even the ones nobody expected to amount to much have done something. All Jack wanted to do was go back to his mother's farm and raise beans, and he ended up stealing a magic harp and killing a giant and all sorts of things. I'm the only one who hasn't succeeded. Why not? The Stone Prince sighed again. I don't know. At first it seemed as if I wouldn't have any trouble finding a king to serve. Every time there was a war, both kings asked me to lead their armies, and every king for miles around who'd lost his throne to a usurper sent a messenger to my father's court. It should have been simple. Only they were always so worried about whether I was going to side with their enemies that it was easier not to pick anyone. I see, said Cimarine. Privately, she thought that the Stone Prince had been rather wishy-washy. Some of her opinion must have crept into her tone because the Stone Prince nodded glumly. You're right, it was a mistake. As long as I didn't pick a king to serve, all the messengers and ambassadors and envoys stayed, hoping to persuade me. The inns around the castle were stuffed with them. It got to the point where I couldn't show my face without at least 3 of them pouncing on me. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and I ran away. It was a relief at first, not having everyone hovering over me, waiting for me to do something great. But after a while, I started feeling uncomfortable. Then I realized that even if nobody around me expected me to do anything special in the service of a king, I expected me to do something. I was so flustered that I ran up to the next palace I saw and asked whether the king needed any services done. It turned out that he was ill, and the doctors had told him that the only thing that would cure him was a drink of the water of healing from the caves of fire and night. So I left to get it at once. So that's what you were doing, Cimarine said. The Stone Prince gave her another gloomy nod. He should have known better. That king had 3 sons, and the first 2 had already gone off to get the water and failed. Anyone with sense would have seen that the youngest son was the one who would succeed. It sticks out all over. But I was too eager to do my great service and get it over with, and I didn't stop and think. What happened? It took me a long time to find the caves of fire and night, but once I did, it wasn't hard to find the water of healing. The chamber's getting crowded. All the princes who've tried to get the water and failed have been turned into slabs of rock. I know, I've seen them, Cimarine said. Watch out for your head, the ceiling is low along here. Then you know what it's like. And you've seen the 2 dippers on the wall by the spring. The Stone Prince's shoulders sagged. I knew I should use the tin one. It was one of the first things we learned at school. But I thought it wouldn't do any harm if I just looked at the gold one, so I took it off the wall. And as soon as I touched it, I started to stiffen up. Said Cimarine. The Stone Prince was obviously well aware of how foolishly he had behaved. She saw no reason to make him feel worse by pointing it out to him again. "So I stuck my arm in the spring," the prince said. "You stuck your arm? Oh, I see. That was clever," Cimarine said. "Do you really think so?" the Stone Prince asked anxiously. "I thought that since the water from the spring is going to turn all the slabs of stone back into princes when someone finally succeeds in the quest, then the water ought to keep me from turning into a slab of stone in the first place. Only it didn't work the way I expected," he finished disconsolately. "I can see that," Cimarine said. "But at least you can still do things. It would be much worse to have to lie there waiting for the right prince to come along and break the spell." "I wouldn't have had to lie there very long," the Stone Prince said. "That king's youngest son is going to arrive any day now. I just know it. Anyway, if I were a slab of stone, I wouldn't know about it until it was all over and I'd been turned back into a prince again." "How do you know?" Cimarine demanded. "Have you ever been a stone slab?" The Stone Prince looked startled. "No, I haven't. I never thought of that." "Well, start thinking now," Cimarine said tartly. "Here's the service room. Wait here for me and don't go wandering off if I'm late getting back. I don't know how long this errand is going to take, and it would be very awkward for me if the dragons found you roaming through their tunnels." "I'll remember," the Stone Prince promised. "But what do I do if someone comes in?" "Duck into the banquet area," Cimarine said, showing him. "And if someone comes in there too, curl up in the corner and pretend you're a rock." "All right," the prince said doubtfully. Cimarine did not like leaving him, but she was even less enthusiastic about taking him to see Roxin. Roxin probably wouldn't object to the prince himself, though Cimarine suspected that there might have been some difficulty over his proposed theft of the water of healing. But explaining everything to the grey-green dragon would take hours. Roxin was nice, but he tended to take a simple view of things, and the prince's situation was anything but simple. So Cimarine gave the prince one more warning just to make sure he understood and started off towards Roxin's cave to finish her errand. Chapter 12, in which Cimarine calls on a dragon and the Stone Prince discovers a plot. The shortcut to Roxim's worked just as well as Cimarine had hoped, and she even made up some of the time she had lost earlier. Roxim was in, too. She could hear the scraping of his scales as he moved around inside. She stepped up to the entrance of the cave and called, "Dragon Roxim!" Something round and shiny flew through the air, missing Cimarine by inches. It hit the wall of the tunnel with a loud clang and slid rattling to the floor. Cimarine jumped. "Roxim!" she shouted at the top of her lungs. "What's this?" the dragon said, poking his nose out of the cave entrance. "I am Cimarine, princess to the dragon Kazul, and I offer you greetings and good fortune in all your endeavours." Cimarine thought it best to be particularly polite in case Roxim were in a bad mood. She suspected he might be. In her experience, someone in a good mood did not throw things at visitors. "Very good," Roxim said. "Nice to see you again and all that, but I haven't got time for visitors at the moment. Sorry." "I'm not a visitor, exactly. Kazul sent me with a message for you." "Oh, well, that's different. Just hand me that shield there, would you?" Cimarine picked up the shield from the floor of the tunnel. There was a large dent in one side where it had hit the tunnel wall, and several smaller ones over the rest of it from banging against things on its way to the tunnel floor. "You ought to be more careful," she said severely. "Just look at this." "Ha!" Roxim snorted, examining the dents. Shoddy work, that's the problem. In my day, you could roll a knight in full armour down the far side of the Vanishing Mountain and bounce him off 2 or 3 cliffs without so much as scratching his surface, much less denting it. This cheap modern stuff just doesn't hold up." "If you know it doesn't hold up, you shouldn't throw it around like that," Cimarine said. "You almost hit me." Roxim shifted uncomfortably. "Sorry, didn't mean anything by it." "All right, but next time look before you throw things," Cimarine said, handing him the shield. "I always have this problem when I try to find something," Roxim confided. "Never know where to look. Gets frustrating, and next thing you know, I'm pitching armor at the walls. Bad habit, but hard to break. Maybe I could help, Cimmerian suggested. After I give you Kazul's message, that is. Don't need help to put dents in things, Roxim said. Comes to that, I don't really want to. I didn't mean help throw things, Cimmerian said patiently. I meant help find whatever you're looking for. Oh, that! Well, come in then. Cimmerian followed the dragon into a moderately large cave, similar to the one Kazul used as a living area. Roxim's cave, however, was full of clutter. Cimmerian had to pick her way past bits of armour, one half of a pair of bookends, a box of tea, a pink scroll, 3 mismatched kitchen pots, a small wooden statue, a broken flute, and 4 partially burned candles. Roxim walked straight over the mess as if it weren't there, squashing a magey-looking stuffed pigeon and flattening a tin cup in passing. He dropped the shield on a pile of silk flowers and waved Cimmerian to a seat on a large wooden chest near one wall. Now, what's this message of Kazul's? It's about the wizards, Cimmerian said, settling gingerly onto the dusty surface of the chest. She made a mental note to find Roxim a nice princess as soon as she possibly could. Ali and Aura and I found one picking Dragon's Bane a few days ago, and Kazul thinks King Tokos will listen to you if you tell him about it. So that's where they got it, Roxim said in tones of disgust. Pity you didn't mention it sooner. Cimmerian got a sinking feeling. What do you mean? Somebody poisoned King Tokos this morning, Roxim explained. Slipped some Dragon's Bane into his coffee. Fast acting. Nothing to be done. Now we need a new king. That's awful, Cimmerian said. Do you know who did it? Those dratted wizards, that's who, Roxim said angrily. It's obvious. Stupid thing to do. Has to be wizards, by George. But Warog won't listen to me. Warog? What's Warog got to do with it? He's in charge of the investigation, Roxim replied. Taking his time about it too, if you ask me. But if the king was only poisoned this morning... What does that have to do with it? Roxim said unreasonably. Besides, if Warog doesn't hurry, he won't have the culprit in hand by the time the trials start tomorrow. Trials? You mean with Colin Stone to choose the new king? Cimmerian said with some hesitation. She did not see how it could be a trial for the person who had killed the king if they hadn't caught him yet, but she was not completely certain that the dragons didn't have some way of getting around the problem and trying him anyway. That's it, Roxim said, pleased. And before I leave, I have to find that emerald I picked up 50 years ago. Coronation present for the new king. But you haven't got a new king yet, Cimmerian said, feeling somewhat bewildered. And what if you're the king? Roxim smiled broadly. Knew you were a nice gal. Me, the king. I rather like the idea. I still have to find the emerald, though. Wouldn't do to show up at the trials without a coronation present. Wrong thing to do. Overconfident. Though she was upset and more than a little worried, Cimmerian helped Roxim as best she could. After about an hour of poking through the clutter, Cimmerian found the emerald, wrapped in a gold-embroidered handkerchief and stuffed into the mouth of a large brass horn. Roxim thanked her, invited her to stay to tea, but Cimmerian politely declined. She was eager to get back to Kazul to tell her what had happened and decide what to do next. Cimmerian hurried back to Kazul's cave by the shortest route, thinking so hard about Tokos' death that she forgot everything else. She found Kazul sleeping and was forced to wake her, despite her worries about the dragon's health. She knew Kazul would want to hear about the king of the dragons as soon as possible, and she wanted to hear what Kazul made of Waraug's involvement in the investigation. Back already? Kazul said, opening her eyes. Didn't Roxim get you in to see King Tokos? No, Cimmerian said. She hesitated, uncertain of the best way to break the news. It was too late. Too late? Kazul raised her head, startled. She eyed Cimmerian briefly, then said, All right, let's have it. What's happened? King Tokos was poisoned this morning. Roxim said someone put Dragon's Bane in his coffee. Kazul snorted. Somebody knew Tokos pretty well. Seeing Simmering's surprised expression, she explained, Tokos drank Turkish coffee every morning. The stuff is strong enough to take off the roof of your mouth. It's why no one ever wants to talk to him over breakfast. You could boil a whole field's worth of dragon's bane in Turkish coffee without changing the taste enough to notice, or the texture. Simmering tried to imagine coffee, even Turkish coffee, strong enough to take the roof off a dragon's mouth, and failed. I told Roxim about the wizard Alienora and I met, and Roxim said I ought to tell Waraug because Waraug is in charge of finding the poisoner, she said. But when you caught Antarel picking dragon's bane, he thought Waraug had sent you, Kazul said. If Waraug's mixed up with wizards... She broke off, coughing. Simmerine watched her anxiously, but the coughing spasm did not last long. I don't like this, Kazul finished when she got her breath back. I don't either, Simmerine agreed. But what can we do about it? Kazul frowned and said nothing. For several minutes the two sat and thought in silence. Then Kazul said, we can't do anything until a new king has been chosen. Did Roxim say when the testing will be? Tomorrow, Simmerine said. Tomorrow? Kazul surged to her feet. Why didn't you say so at once? If I'm to be at the Ford of Whispering Snakes tomorrow, I have to... Lie down, Simmerine commanded. Kazul looked at her in surprise and collapsed in another fit of coughing. Simmerine waited until a dragon's coughing had subsided, then said sternly, You're in no condition to go hauling rocks all over the countryside. I'd be surprised if you could even fly as far as the end of the pass. I think you're going to have to give up on the trials this time around. Kazul made a choking noise. Simmerine looked at her in alarm, then realised that the dragon was laughing. It's not optional, Princess, Kazul said. All the adult dragons in the Mountains of Morning are required to show up, no matter what condition they're in. But there is no acceptable excuse for missing the testing of a new king, Kazul repeated. None. And I have a great deal to do before I leave, so if anything needs to be done around here, I'll do it, Simmerine said firmly. If you don't rest, you won't be able to fly at all, and then how will you get to the ford? A reasonable point, Kazul said, settling reluctantly back into place. Very well. The first thing I need is a coronation present for the new king. There's a jeweled helmet on a shelf in a second storeroom that might do. Bring it out so I can take a look at it. Simmerine spent the rest of the evening running errands for Kazul. Besides choosing a coronation gift, Kazul rejected the helmet and 2 crowns before deciding on a scepter made of gold and crystal. Innumerable messages had to be delivered to various dragons who were in charge of arranging the trials. This one had to be informed of Kazul's ill health, so that it could be taken into account when the order of the testing was established. That one had to be told that Kazul would not be able to join the coronation procession. Substitutes had to be found to perform Kazul's various ceremonial duties. Then their names had to be approved by a surly dragon in charge of protocol, and finally the substitutions had to be recorded on all the lists of all the dragons who were managing each of the events. It reminded Simmerine strongly of Lindawall in her parents' court. By the time the last arrangement had been made and the last message delivered, it was very late, and Simmerine was exhausted. She was also very glad that she had not let Kazul do all the running around. The dragon, who had slept most of the time Simmerine was out, was looking much better, even in the dim light of Simmerine's lamp. Tired but satisfied, Simmerine went to her room and dropped into bed. Simmerine was up early the next morning, stirring a dozen ostrich eggs in a large iron kettle for Kazul's breakfast. Kazul ate all of them, then slid out of the cave and prepared to leave for the Ford of Whispering Snakes. Don't fret, Princess, Kazul said. The testing doesn't start until 10. I have plenty of time together, even if I stop to rest now and then. Her voice sounded much better than it had the day before, and it no longer seemed to rasp her throat. While I'm gone, why don't you visit Waraug's, Princess? See if she's noticed anything odd these past few days. We need to know as much as we can before we talk to the new king about Waraug and the wizards. All right, Simrine said, as soon as I'm done with the dishes. Kazul turned and leaped into the air, her wings churning clouds of dust from the dry surface of the ground. Simrine squinted after her and shouted, "Good luck!" Kazul's wings dipped in answer before the dragon soared out of sight behind the shoulder of the next mountain. Simrine stood looking after Kazul, her forehead wrinkling in worry. After a moment, she shook herself and went inside. She had work to do. Washing the dishes did not take long, and as soon as she was done, Simrine set off to visit Alienora. The tunnels and passageways were silent and empty, and Simrine's footsteps echoed eerily through the darkness. She began to wish she had taken the longer route along the outside of the mountain. She had not realized that the dragon city would seem so strange and lifeless with all the dragons gone. Psst! Simrine! Simrine jumped. She whirled in the direction of the voice, raising her lamp like a club, and Alienora stepped out of the adjoining tunnel and into the circle of light. In one hand she clutched a large bucket, 3/4 full of soapy water, and she looked rather pale. "Alienora," Simrine said, lowering her arm, "what are you doing out here?" "Shh," Alienora said. She looked nervously over her shoulder. "Warag told me to scrub off the table in the banquet room while everyone was away, and I heard someone moving around in there, even though everyone but us is gone, and I dropped my lamp and—" "Oh my goodness," Simrine said. "The Stone Prince! I'd forgotten about him." "Who?" "The Stone Prince." Quickly, Simrine explained how she had found and hidden him the day before. "And I hadn't thought about it until now, but this is the perfect time to get him out of the mountains," she finished. "All the dragons are gone and no one will see him. Come on, before I forget again." Alienora nodded dubiously, and the two girls headed for the banquet room. When they arrived, Simrine went in first, holding her lamp high. "Prince," she called. "Are you there? It's me, Simrine." "Yes, I'm here," said the Stone Prince, unfolding stiffly from a grey lump in the corner. "I'm glad you're back. Who's this you brought with you?" "Princess Alienora of the Duchy of Torion Marsh," Simrine said. "She's the princess of the Dragon Warag just now." "Does her father need a great service done for him?" the prince asked hopefully. "Not that I know of," Simrine replied. "Unless you're good at getting rid of aunts, but that would be more of a service to Alienora than to her father." "I can think of nothing that would make me happier," the prince said with evident admiration as he bowed stiffly to Alienora. "Good afternoon, princess. Or should it be good evening? It's hard to tell without windows." Alienora blushed and looked down at her bucket without answering. "Actually, it's good morning," Simrine told the prince. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back for you, but, well, a lot has been going on." Alienora looked up sharply. "You've been sitting here in the dark all night?" She shuddered. "You could at least have left him a candle, Simrine." "Thank you for the thought, Princess Alienora, but it's just as well she didn't," the Stone Prince said. "If I'd been sitting here with a lit candle, they'd have noticed me right away. And an unlit candle isn't much use in the dark, is it?" "What do you mean?" Simrine said. "Who would have noticed you?" "The dragon and the two men he was talking to," replied the prince. "I think they were wizards." "What?" said Simrine and Alienora together. "Well, they talked as if they were wizards," the prince said. "They weren't carrying staffs, though." "What did they look like?" Simrine said. They were both tall and they both had beards. The older ones was grey and the younger ones was brown." "Antarel and Zeminar," Simrine said. "And they were talking to a dragon?" The Stone Prince nodded. "Then they wouldn't have been carrying staffs. Dragons are allergic to them." "Did you hear what they said?" Something about a contest," the Stone Prince said. "The wizards were going to fix it so this dragon would win. It sounded like a kind of cross-country race, and the wizards were going to hide along the path and help the dragon out somehow. I'm afraid I'm not very clear about that part. Spells aren't my speciality. I'm much better at hopeless causes." Alienora and Simrine exchanged appalled glances. "The trials with Colin Stone to pick the new king," Alienora said. Which dragon? Cimarine asked urgently. Do you know which dragon they were talking to? I only heard the name once, the prince said. He sounded apologetic and a little embarrassed. And I don't think I got it right. It's too silly. Tell us, Cimarine commanded. Well, it sounded like warthog, the prince said in an even more apologetic tone than before. Could it have been Waraug? Cimarine asked. That's it, the prince said. I knew it couldn't really have been warthog. What a pity you remembered, said a voice from the entrance into the banquet hall. Cimarine whirled. Antarel stood in the doorway, staff in hand, watching them with an intolerably smug expression. Chapter 13, Part 1, in which Alienora discovers an unexpected use for soap and water, and Cimarine has difficulty with a dragon. Antarel looked past Cimarine and Alienora as if they were not there and spoke directly to the Stone Prince. I told Father someone was listening. He won't be happy when he finds out I was right, but he'll feel better when I tell him I've taken care of things. He might even let me have the first look in the King's crystal once Waraug gives it to us. So that's what you're after, Cimarine said. Antarel favoured her with a superior smile. Quite right, Princess Cimarine. The King's crystal will show us the whereabouts of every piece of useful and interesting magic in the world. Then all we'll have to do is go out and pick them up. Somehow I don't think it will be that easy, Cimarine murmured. We knew Tokos would never give it to us, but Waraug will as soon as he's king of the dragons. He'll have to, or we'll tell everyone how we were the ones who made sure he was the new king. Of course, we can't afford to have anybody around who might make awkward revelations. I doubt that dragons will listen to a couple of hysterical princesses, but he, Antarel pointed at the Stone Prince, will have to go. What's he going to do? Alienora demanded. She was plainly frightened, and Cimarine could see that her knuckles were white with the force of her grip on the handle of the scrub bucket. Oh, gravel seems appropriate, don't you think? Antarel said. No one will notice a few more rocks around here. Ought I to be taking this person seriously? Said the Stone Prince in a rather doubtful tone. Better if you don't want to end up as a lot of little pebbles, Alienora answered. She still sounded frightened, but she seemed to be getting a grip on herself. He's a wizard. You wouldn't be talking about gravel if you were the one who had to sweep the floor, Cimarine said to Antarel. She stepped forward as she spoke, hoping to get between Antarel and the Stone Prince before Antarel noticed what she was doing. She didn't think Antarel was a good enough wizard to do any real harm, but there was no point in taking chances. Stay where you are, Princess Cimarine, Antarel commanded. I'll deal with you in a moment. Must you be so theatrical? Cimarine said. Theatrical? You think I'm being theatrical? Antarel said furiously. I am simply showing a proper respect for the importance of this moment. You're showing off, Cimarine said flatly, and you're not doing it very well. He doesn't sound much like a wizard to me, the Stone Prince said. Is he always like this? Enough, Antarel cried, and raised his staff. Light shimmered along its length and began to gather at the lower end. Grinning wolfishly, the wizard tilted the staff, aiming it towards the Stone Prince. Stop that, Alienora said. Antarel ignored her. I said, stop it, Alienora shouted, and threw her bucket at Antarel's head. Alienora's aim was off. The bucket hit Antarel's shoulder. A bolt of fire shot from the end of his staff and whizzed between Cimarine and the Stone Prince to strike the far wall with a whomping noise and a shower of sparks. Antarel staggered, slipped in the cascade of soapy water, and fell over the bucket, dropping his staff in the process. Cimarine darted in and kicked Antarel's staff out of his reach. He stared up at her from a mound of soggy silk and soap suds. You can't do this to me, he shrieked. Something in his voice made Cimarine and her friends look at him more closely. Alienora's eyes went wide and Cimarine blinked in surprise. He's collapsing, Alienora said in a stunned voice. He's melting, Cimarine corrected her. I can't be melting, Antirel cried. I'm a wizard! It's not fair! His head disappeared into a small brown puddle and his cries stopped. There was a moment of astonished silence. I thought it was witches who melt when you dump water over them, the Stone Prince said at last. It is, usually, Cimarine said. What on earth did you put in that bucket, Alienora? Just water and soap and a little lemon juice to make it smell nicer, Alienora said. Said Cimarine, thinking hard. I'll bet there's a simpler way of melting wizards, but we don't have time right now to figure out what it is. How many buckets can you get hold of in a hurry? Buckets, Alienora said. 2, counting this one. And I suppose I could borrow one from Helena, that's 3. And I've got 2 in the kitchen, and I expect the iron kettle is big enough. That's 6 altogether, 2 for each of us. You will help, won't you? Cimarine added, turning to the Stone Prince. Of course, the prince assured her. Help with what? Stopping those wizards, Cimarine said. We can't let them make Waraug the next king of the dragons by trickery. I don't see how we can stop them, Alienora said. We can't possibly get to the Ford of Whispering Snakes before the trials start, and even if we could, we don't know where the wizards will be hiding. If we tell the dragons that Waraug's trying to cheat, they'll stop the trials, Cimarine said, with more confidence than she felt. That will give us time to find the wizards. And I've got a way to get us to the Ford. You go start collecting buckets. I'll meet you at your place after I get the things I'll need from Kazul's. What about... Alienora gestured with distaste at the wet, messy lump of robes in the centre of the puddle that was all that remained of Antirel. We'll clean it up when we get back, Cimarine said. This is more important. Alienora nodded, and the 3 left the banquet room. The Stone Prince decided to accompany Alienora since he was not a fast walker, and Cimarine had farther to go. Cimarine left them when they reached the main tunnel and ran back to Kazul's cave. There she went straight to her room and opened the drawer where she kept odds and ends. In the back left-hand corner, carefully wrapped in a handkerchief, were the 3 black feathers she had taken from beneath the left wing of the bird she had killed in the enchanted forest. She shoved the whole packet into her pocket without bothering to unwrap it and went on to the kitchen to collect her buckets. Then she hurried through the tunnels to Waraug's cave, where Alienora and the Stone Prince were waiting. When Cimarine arrived, she found the Stone Prince pumping water to fill Alienora's 3rd bucket, while Alienora mixed soap and lemon juice into the 2nd. Cimarine set her pots and pails next to the pump and went to help Alienora. Now what? Alienora said when all the buckets were full of cleaning mixture. Cimarine reached into her pocket and dug out the package. Gently, she unfolded the handkerchief and removed one of the feathers, noticing as she did that the package also contained the pebble she had picked up in the caves of Fire and Night. If we each take 2 buckets, can we still link elbows without spilling too much? She asked. Alienora and the Stone Prince looked at each other, shrugged, and picked up 2 buckets each. Cimarine took the last bucket in the iron pot, holding the handle of the pot with only 3 fingers so that she could keep a grip on the feather with her thumb and forefinger. A series of awkward manoeuvres followed as Alienora and the Stone Prince tried to link elbows with Cimarine without losing their balance or dropping one of their buckets. In the process, Cimarine's skirt got soaked. It's a good thing I'm not a wizard, Cimarine said. Ready? Here we go. She twisted her hand towards the edge of the iron pot and let go of the black feather. I wish we were at the Ford of Whispering Snakes, she said as the feather fell, and the room dissolved around them.
More!
I am loving this story.
This is so exciting.
Isn't it great? I'm so glad you're enjoying it.
Yep.
What will happen now?
I loved the interjections of your cat, Frankie.
Did you hear?
Yeah.
God, I was like,
Everything was silent and meow, meow.
I was really hoping Zoom would like cut her out. Like I was kind of thinking, I was like, should I pause it and let her in, or is she's gonna make more noise? Oh, no, let's see if she's still there.
Oh.
Not negotiated terrorists. Very.
She's gone now, obviously. Now that we've stopped, she's gone to find some small furry thing to torture.
Dragons are such a bunch of old men.
It's, probably too early before the final session to say, but it's like probably my favorite of the sort of magical stories that we've certainly the sort of like dragons and like magic side of direction, the fantasy direction.
Yeah. That's so exciting.
I kind of think of, say, the Night Circus as a very different area that's like magical romance and other stuff.
Yeah, it's almost more like period piece meets fantasy as an intersection, so it's like a different spot in my brain, whereas this feels a lot more like fairy tale fantasy, classic fantasy.
But it's so fucking whimsical!
I love it so much, I finished it on the weekend.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
I love how.
No, what were
I
you
was going to say, I love how she was completely cut up when she accidentally killed that bird, or accidentally on purpose killed that bird with the sword. But she melts the wizard, and she's just like, meh, whatever.
I think it shows a good sense of priorities.
She values the good things.
Yeah, well, I think I've pretty much almost completely decided that the next book that we will be doing is 1,000 Nights, which is that one with the very deceptively bad blurb that is actually not bad. And then I thought after that we would do Howl's Moving Castle. So if you are here for whimsy and charm, then I think that's probably got sufficient whimsy and charm to.
You actually wrote that.
Diana Wynne Jones.
I didn't know that. I've only seen the
Yeah, I got another book by her that in my delivery. There you are. See, it is sensible keeping things by colour order. It's called The House of Many Ways. There we go. And so I'll need to have a little. Oh! Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize. So this is the third in the series. In fact, I'd completely forgotten most of what it was about, and I thought that it was a standalone, but it's actually the third in the series of Howl's Moving Castle. So we will not be doing this because that would be an insane thing to do. But there you go. So 1,000 Nights next, then Howl's Moving Castle.
When are you wanting to start your next book?
Thursday. I mean, I was just planning on doing the usual like night off on Wednesday post book and then start the next one. But if people would rather have a longer break, then that's fine. What's that, darling?
No.
Yeah, that's enough for me. I'm all right with just one day, but if you want more time, that's okay. We'll wait for you.
Nah. One night's good enough for me. What would I do? What would I do without you? Be sad.
Go and break some more beds.
Yeah, I can have a go, I suppose, but I have to this is my bed and I have to sleep in it. I don't want to break this one. I only break other people's beds. That's how it works. And so I'll just have to do story time instead.
Yep. Frankie, do you mind if I say a little flashy highlights of... So some people have been seeing I've been recording the book Magician. And I'm actually just uploaded chapter 4 and now uploading chapter 5. Because I recorded a couple while I was up north, and then I realized how very slow my parents' internet is, which the answer is very. But also just meaning it looked like a few more people were starting to watch the first chapters now, which is absolutely cool. But essentially it is sort of proper fantasy, but not to say that this is not proper fantasy. But it's sort of very much stereotypical fantasy, but it is a really excellent story. We can continue digging. It's also got probably 90% male characters, unfortunately. You know, I give that privilege, but at the same time, it is still a good story written in its time of fantasy, shall we say, 20-something years ago.
Does it have any characters that don't get married?
Yes.
Oh. Improvement on Lord of the Rings, then.
Yes. I think yes is the answer to that, but I did have to think about it.
Oh, that sounds cool. Well, I mean, what I've definitely felt that this is lacking is, you know, dudes. Like...
Well, it's got the Stone Prince.
It's been kind of a nice break that way.
Yeah. But certainly, Magician, in chapter 4, shit starts to go down, but in chapter 5, shit starts to really go down. I want to highlight how much I start loving the book. Yeah, anyway.
Excellent. Excellent.
I mean, I'm really just hoping the Stone Prince gets to have his day by turning out to be entirely fireproof.
That would be amazing.
Like, I just wanted to have to fight a dragon, and the dragon breathes fire on him, and it's just like stone.
Yeah. What do we think's gonna happen?
I really like him as a character because he's actually nice. And
yeah.
Michael, if you happen to dream about making that art, though, like I'd toss a little bit of money towards that art happening. Just a Stone Prince with dragons flying. Yeah.
We're about to say goodnight, but is there anything that we need to know for tomorrow for preparing for the finale?
Well, I mean, suggested food, Cherry's Jubilee, and or chocolate mousse, and or anything dragon related. Like gingerbread, I guess, could be fun. Like the, you know, Morwen's, there's a witch and she has a house, little bit tentative, whatever. Cherry's Jubilee, fuck it. Cider.
Yes.
Cider, good call. In mugs, cider in mugs.
Yes.
Water with a little bit of like soapy water with a little bit of like lint in it. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Robes. It's all good.
See you guys tomorrow with some disgusting beverages.
Bye.
Oh, should we say goodnight to the catch-up crew as well?
Good night.
Night.
Thank Catch Up Crew, we love you.
We love you, catch-up crew.